many as 5. And then there's several others that are trying. They're on the trying list.
But in each of those cases, you're either dealing with such a small number of weapons where, and like North Korea, it would be very hard for it to get out of control of that type of government. Would you say the biggest possibility would probably be a country like Russia with
absolutely.
29, 30,000 small tactical warheads?
Absolutely.
How do you keep track of all those warheads?
Well, yeah, and the other thing there is that, I mean, these are people who for decades have had to find ways of overcoming and circumventing the bureaucracy to get what they want as individuals. And the problem in Russia today is that the potential for luring somebody into doing this is so great because the economy is in shambles there. People are fearful about their future. When you have a group of people whose average yearly income is $1,000 or less, and someone from some outside source offers them potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, for some of this nuclear material, it causes these people that may have ability and access and opportunity to think twice about that.
And we also have a criminal element that's come up. It's ironic that under the Soviet Union, which we feared, that the danger actually may be greater now that Russia is a democracy, or I mean a fledgling open market economy, because of this, the increase in say the Russian mafia, for lack of a better term. I know, you know, it's a organized criminal element.
Well, that's what they call it themselves inside of Moscow. They call it the mafia.
So how hard would it be for them to cut a deal with some, say, the cocaine billionaire coke lords? And who's their greatest nemesis in the world, really?
Well, again, I think that the potential is really there. And what you would, the question is, why would you want the nuclear material? Why would you want the weapon? It seems to me that there's two reasons. One could be political terrorism, and the other is the narco-terrorism in order to protect their financial empire, as you point out. As you well know, there are many groups in the world that are or have a political agenda that the United States, they feel, is their biggest nemesis that's keeping that agenda from happening. Not just the people in the Middle East, Hamas, but also people like the Bosnian Serbs even could be feeling that the United States is thwarting their political agenda. But at any rate, those kind of terrorists, they would want these weapons for a couple of reasons. One is to bring attention and to demand and blackmail that the United States pay attention to their particular aspirations, political aspirations, and maybe allow those aspirations to succeed. The other is to retaliate if they feel that the United States in the past or in the future may do something that is intolerable to them, and they have no way through conventional military power or conventional economic power to retaliate. They can at least retaliate through the terrorist type thing. The narco-terrorism is it's kind of in the latter. The narco-terrorism knows that the United States is determined to wipe out their drug empire, and these people are determined to keep that empire going and the dollars rolling that they're getting out of it. And it is a possible way to tell the United States back off a little bit. Which would you rather have? So much cocaine coming into your country, or the potential of losing one of your major cities to some kind of...
So really, Saddam Hussein and the cocaine drug lords really pretty much aligned in that way, that they each have their own sphere of influence. If there was no United States government, and let's just do a what if. What if, and we're talking about weapons, what, small enough to possibly even fit in the trunk of a car?
Oh, absolutely.
On some of these?
Sure.
So it wouldn't take a genius...
about the size of a basketball, for example.
That they could pull up behind the White House gates or over next to Congress, walk away. They're not going to call up, I suppose, and say, hey, we're about to set this thing off. What would happen if one of these things blew up in the middle of Washington, D.C.? What would happen to the United States of America?
Well, there's a real possibility that given the right conditions, you could decapitate the leadership of our country. In other words, if the president was in residence, if the Congress was in session, especially, let's assume you did it at anywhere on Capitol Hill during the time that this president was giving the State of the Union address to Congress. There you have the leaders of all the Joint Chiefs of Staff are there, the secretaries of all the cabinet agencies are there, the leaders of Congress, the members of Congress. There are hundreds of apartments located within a mile or a kilometer radius of the Capitol building, that kind of weapon could go in, and you could, in one fell swoop, decapitate the United States government.
Would we be under martial law?
Oh yeah, immediately. I mean, there are backups, and there are backup command authorities that step in under the national emergency guidelines. But it would be immediately, I would say, martial law while we try to figure out who was responsible for this and to retaliate for it.
Would democracy in the United States, as we've known it, pretty much cease to exist?
For a time. For a time. It would be while they sorted this out until they solved the problem. It could be anywhere from 30 days to 6 years, or whatever it took in terms of sorting this out. I'd say 6 months.
But if this continues, say they maybe detonated another one, and the survivalists start coming out of the woodwork, and people, you know how everybody would
in other words, then if you get in the panic and you feel that you have to do something to keep this from happening, therefore you would want to close down on the freedom of travel, the freedom of movement, the freedom of access to our country from abroad and so forth. And it would make a different lifestyle. I mean, obviously, when we travel today out at the airport, our lifestyle is much different than what it was 25 years ago before hijacking began. We used to just walk right on the airplane. Now we have to go through these extra security precautions before we get on the airplane. And it would be the same things in our lives, where we're used to just being able to get in the car, drive to Washington, D.C. There could very well be roadblocks at strategic locations where you have to endure searches of your car for the good of society and finding these terrorists or finding potential terrorist threats. So it would change our lifestyle.
Is Saddam Hussein still a potential threat to the United States?
Well, I think that he is. Saddam is determined to stay in power. Saddam thinks he has a vision for the Arab world that is going to be a salvation for the Arab world, and I think that Saddam recognizes that the United States is going to continue pressure on him and will never allow Iraq to emerge as a full-fledged member of the international community again as long as Saddam's in power. And Saddam would like to strike back.
Do you think, and you're a Middle East expert also, that revenge in the mind of a man like Saddam, we haven't heard much about him, you know, other than his military moves here recently.
Well, that's right.
But do you think he would love to come back on us?
It's part of the cultural heritage over there. I mean, it's the old biblical almost eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth mentality. Remember, they're not Christians and they haven't accepted the love your fellow man brotherhood aspect of the New Testament. And all you have to do is look at Lebanon as a microcosm to see that. All of the factions in Lebanon. For example, Dori Shamoun's brother was killed in a particular fight against one of the other clans inside of Lebanon, and his father kept that body in a freezer for 12 years until he could kill the son of the clan leader who had killed his son, and only then would he bury that son that had been killed by the other clan. My point here is that this idea of retaliation and revenge and the eye for the eye is very much part of the culture of this area, and therefore you would have to assume that Saddam would like to, if at all possible, find some way of striking back against the United States.
You know, I think people kind of think, well, gosh, there's Saddam over there and there's South America way over there. But really, it's an international phone call, isn't it, for these guys to communicate with each other, if they really wanted to. And I'm not, you know, making up anything that really could not already be happening, yet we don't know it, if the truth were actually known. Like the bombers for the World Trade Center, I mean, obviously, was that a retaliation for something that the United States had done at that time, do you think, in your opinion?
Well, I think certainly that it is, if it is true as it appears to be, that the perpetrators were these Islamic extremists, that it's obviously an attempt to strike back at the agency that they perceive to be the greatest nemesis of the true believers, the Islamic fundamentalists in the world. And it's a strike back for things that we've done towards Iran. It's a strike back for things that we've done in southern Lebanon towards Hamas and the other similar.
We had the raid on Gaddafi.
The raid on Gaddafi. There's a lot of beliefs that, for example, the people who who bombed that Pan Am Flight 103 were subcontracted by the Iranians as a payback for the accidental downing that we did of an Iranian airliner, if you recall, the